Today's topic, meditation. Meditation is known almost exclusively for its manifold positive effects on body and mind. No side effects. Hang on, that's actually not the truth. In this video, I will reveal what the downsides of awareness and mindfulness are. According to advertisements, people who meditate regularly are not only more calm and relaxed, they also improve their ability to concentrate and their self-confidence. Brain areas involved enlarge after a few weeks of meditation only, according to the promises of meditation gurus and apps. It is undisputed that yoga, meditation and mindfulness can have many positive effects, but what about the downside? $1 billion market has grown around yoga, meditation and mindfulness. But the seemingly gentle methods can have undesirable consequences for the individual and for society. Many people crave for moments of relaxation. The years of pandemic have been exhausting. The war in Europe triggers fears. Likewise, knowledge of climate change, problems, conflicts, disputes, even hatred in almost every corner of the world. On top of that, the many demands at work, in the family, in leisure time. That's why many people feel stressed, often or all the time. Stress can promote or aggravate many physical and mental illnesses. Back pain, digestive problems and migraine may occur, as well as sleep disorders and certain forms of depression. Mental health problems are among the most common reasons for sick leave at work. It is clear that people see the issue. They are already doing a lot to counteract the problem, to escape stress and to do something good for themselves. Take me as an example. I also tried meditation and yoga, and I am still doing meditation occasionally and a few yoga poses almost every day as part of my healthy back routine. I am by no means against yoga, meditation and awareness. On the contrary, I think the benefits outweigh the downsides for me personally. But to get a full picture, it makes sense to look at both bright and dark sides. According to a quick Google search, 15% of adults in Northern America and Europe meditate. Meditation apps like Calm or Headspace are international bestsellers and make big money. According to the Statistica Global Consumer Survey in Germany, 1 in 4 respondents had downloaded such an app. The revenue of these apps in the year 2023 is around 4 billion euros worldwide. In 2027, it could reach almost 7 billion euros according to forecasts. In Germany, even health insurance companies are paying for courses and apps. The statutory health insurance funds provided around 538 million euros for individual prevention courses and workplace health promotion measures in 2022. 30% more than in the previous year. But what's the big deal about the huge wave around mindfulness anyway? Can mindfulness techniques actually alleviate everyday problems? And what exactly is mindfulness? Meditation is one aspect of the extensive yoga teachings. Yoga, in turn, is rooted in the same tradition as Hinduism and encompasses various styles. Most of them have in common that the path to enlightenment leads, among other things, through sometimes complicated contortions called asanas. Relaxation meditation is also part of most yoga sessions. Mindfulness, on the other hand, can be described as a special form of meditation. It is about perceiving one's own thoughts and feelings in the respective moment without judging them. Once you have mastered this technique, you can apply it in everyday life without having to meditate. Mindful cooking is then possible. Mindful driving, or even, as in the bestseller by Carsten Duse, mindful murdering. Except then, as in this crime parody, someone is killed, there would be nothing against gentle practices that make people healthy, happy and calm, and possibly even help to avoid absence from work. Or is there any downside too? Meanwhile, there are increasing signs that the feel-good trend has downsides. For people with mental illnesses, the methods can even intensify their suffering. In the US alone, hundreds of cases have been documented in which people have left so-called mindfulness camps, which actually promise peace and contemplation, with delusions, schizophrenic episodes, and panic attacks. Meditation can have a positive effect on anxiety, but responsible mindfulness trainers advise people with certain anxiety disorders or traumata experiences against meditation without therapeutic guidance. Even for more stable people, meditation techniques can have an effect that is not only positive. The noise of the world can be silenced by meditation in such a lasting way that the focus becomes on oneself instead. On the one hand, the world in its current state can certainly use more relaxed people. On the other hand, because of the many crises, it is necessary for people to pay attention, not only to themselves, but also to the others around them. Individualization is advancing anyways, and sociologist Andreas Reckwitz of Berlin's Humboldt University has long since described the dangers that arise from this in his landmark work, The Society of Singularities. The view of the big picture of the general, as Reckwitz calls it, is losing significance. Other humanistic scholars and social scientists argue along the same lines. In his similarly titled work, the US philosopher Michael Sandel laments the end of the common good. Is the boom in mindfulness possibly producing an army of egoists, content and serene, but indifferent to fellow human beings, the state of the world, and climate change? Do meditation apps need package inserts that warn users of psychological consequences? Properly applied, yoga and meditation can measurably reduce stress and anxiety, but it is unclear whether they are more effective than frequent walks in the woods or other forms of physical activity. Regular exercise as well as yoga can reduce stress and prevent the development of many diseases. What evidence is there for the positive effect of the methods from a scientific point of view? And can mindfulness also do harm? Drumroll! Despite many studies, it is hardly possible to make reliable statements about the healing effects of mindfulness. Most studies are based on pure correlations. For example, if people indicate in a questionnaire how mindful they are and how satisfied they feel, it remains open whether the inner contemplation is actually the cause. And experimental studies often lack a control group, people who do a different exercise and with whom the results of the mindful are compared. Not very scientific. Only the stress-reducing and emotion-regulating effects which aim to reduce inner turmoil with the help of mindfulness are reasonably well documented. In his studies, however, Schindler, a professor of psychology at the Hochschule, aka University des Bundes für öffentliche Verwaltung in Berlin, has also found evidence that meditation affects consciousness. He had students complete a guided 12-minute breathing exercise in which they were supposed to let their thoughts wander completely mindfully without judgment or evaluation. Then they were confronted with a scenario in which others had been harmed by their behavior. For example, a fictitious friend had his bicycle stolen because the test person had borrowed it and parked it without securing it with a lock. In a somewhat differently designed experiment, videos of animals suffering in meat production were shown. Schindler then wanted to know how guilty do the meat-eating students feel after watching the documentary. Would they, for example, give extra money for their birthday to the person whose bike they were responsible for losing? Or want to eat less meat in response to the video? In the mindfulness group, the urge to repair the damage was less pronounced than in the control group, Schindler reports. The guilt was also mitigated and therefore people felt less responsible. You could say that mindfulness makes you more uncaring and the suffering of others blurs into the fog of well-being. Even the professor stated the results have put me in a real role conflict as a scientist and mindfulness believer. They definitely haven't made meditating easier for me. That's because the value-free attitude in mindfulness could theoretically justify any action, no matter how morally problematic. Psychologist Thomas Joyner also fears that mindfulness can promote selfish behavior. At Florida State University, he primarily researches depression and suicidality. Mindfulness, Joyner says, has degenerated into a tool for self-optimization, a means to get ahead in life. In his book, Mindlessness, the scientist looked at modern variations of the mindfulness movement. The modern cult of individuality promotes positive introspection, Joyner says. For him, these egocentric variants have little in common with the original idea of mindfulness. What ideally should have nothing to do with the self has been distorted to be exclusively about that. Humans are already inherently self-interested creatures. Do we really need more encouragement to do that? It's still hard to see whether any harm to society could come from the trend. Do those who have fabricated a big ego only annoy those around them? Or does a lack of concern for others reach further? Researchers like sociologist Hartmut Rosa of Friedrich Schiller University, Indiana expect the mindfulness hype to have consequences for society. Mindfulness becomes problematic where the fault is sought exclusively in the mind of the individual. There it simply translates troublesome social conditions into a subjective problem, he writes in the Journal of Psychology heute. For similar reasons, US education expert Alfie Cohn urges caution in the use of mindfulness exercises in schools. The method could give students the impression that they have to accept pressure to perform and accept injustice as well. After all, they could breathe away the misery during the next unit of mindfulness. This was also the tone of a recent proposal to combat the shortage of teachers in German schools. To compensate for the additional work, the Standing Scientific Commission of the Standing Conference of the Ministers of Education and Cultural Affairs of the Federal Republic of Germany recommended that teachers simply take advantage of mindfulness training. This is where mindfulness meets the logic of capitalism. Inner reflection to optimize performance is interesting for institutions and companies because the measures are comparatively inexpensive, at least cheaper than hiring new people to reduce the workload of the staff. Before we continue, I would like to ask for a small favor. If you like these very research and time-intensive videos, please subscribe to the channel and also leave a thumbs up. I so stay motivated and continue to do my best to summarize my hours of research and rehash it in a few minutes so that you are a little smarter without having to put in all the many hours. However, mindfulness can also promote self-overestimation. At least for yoga, psychologist Jochen Gebauer from the University of Mannheim figured that out. He is actually an expert on self-esteem and narcissism. In his only scientific foray into the world of mindfulness to date, he has investigated whether the relaxation techniques, as is often assumed, lead to feelings of well-being by dampening the human urge for self-aggrandizement and ensuring the realistic self-image. According to the traditional assumption, for example, yoga is supposed to overcome the ego. In truth, the opposite apparently happens. According to Gebauer's study in the journal Psychological Science, those who practice yoga and meditation have a greater tendency to overestimate themselves than the control group who do not. However, the test subjects' high opinion of themselves did not apply to all areas of life, but the respondents were convinced that they were better at yoga than others in their course. This kind of overconfidence exists in all fields, Gebauer explains. His study shows, however, that yoga is no exception among the strategies people use to gain a flattering view of themselves. For the individual, this is not a disadvantage. People who overestimate themselves do better psychologically than others. There are, however, people who experience tangible psychological problems as a result of these practices. Psychologist Willoughby Brighton is an expert on this. She doesn't have to think long when asked what the most common misconception is about meditation. People say meditating is always calming, relaxing, and nice, Brighton says. Pleasant like vanilla scent, or a warm bath. Brighton can only shake her head at that notion. Brighton researches the risk and side effects of meditation. She knows the techniques well. As a student, she meditated herself. After a close friend took her own life, she fell into a deep hole. She felt too young to be on medication. Her father gave her a meditation book. It helped. In her doctoral dissertation in clinical psychology, Brighton researched the effect of meditation on sleep. Some of her subjects also suffered from symptoms of depression. Brighton expected them to improve. However, contrary to her assumption, the meditator slept worse. She found that the brain was more aroused, that there were less deep sleep, and that this was directly related to how much people meditated. For 5 years, she didn't dare publish her findings because they ran counter to a mainstream that praised the method as a panacea. When Brighton told a meditation teacher about her discoveries, she just shrugged. I don't know why you psychologists are always trying to make meditation a relaxation technique. Everyone knows, she said, that a lot of meditation can cause sleep disturbances. Together with colleagues, Brighton has compiled 60 symptoms that can occur after meditation for a study over the past decade. Among them, there are insomnia, panic attacks, and hallucinations. These symptoms do not quite fit into the cloudy image of the wellness movement. In the meantime, however, awareness of such experiences is growing. After Brighton publicized the side effects of meditation, so many people affected by meditation accidents approached her that she opened her own facility. The Shita House in Provence helps and counsels about 500 mindfulness affected people a year. Half of our patients come from meditation retreats, Brighton reports. Seminars of several days in which participants meditate under guidance. They often have a good experience at first, but at some point during their stay that changes. Then extreme panic, fear or sleeplessness occur. Some of those affected even develop symptoms of psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, manias. Brighton estimates that 20% of her patients require hospitalization. With her colleagues Simon Goldberg of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, she conducted a survey. The two wanted to know how often negative consequences of meditation occur. The result, among the roughly 1,000 respondents, nearly 50% had meditated at some time. About half of these people had some kind of negative experience. They said, after all, says Brighton, most are mild and temporary and don't require treatment. But 1 in 10 meditators have and had a side effect that affected her or his daily life and lasted for a month or up to a year. Affected people still have a hard time finding help in such cases. Instead, problems are even presented to them by many meditation professionals as progress on the path to true insight. According to Brighton, meditation in particular is strategically cleverly positioned. Located in the wellness space, it can take advantage of all the benefits of science and medicine. You can market yourself as science-based without any regulations or accountability. The mindfulness movement is also a niche for people who are particularly devoted to or exclusively concerned with themselves. In her practice in California, American psychologist Amani Dovazula primarily treats people who suffer from narcissism. She describes the strategies that narcissistic personalities use to manipulate their environment. According to her observations, mindfulness and meditation fit perfectly with the manipulative predilections of narcissists. Narcissistic people love mindfulness work because it is very focused on the moment. The psychologist explains in a post, it allows them to do whatever feels good the moment. Why show up at a dinner at home as promised when you are so in the moment and having a good time at the bar? Mindfulness thus serves as a justification for impulsive behavior. Mindfulness is not a substitute for empathy and self-criticism. What does it all mean? Hands-off meditation apps? Skip the yoga studio? Be cautious of mindfulness? Anyone who feels good during meditation or yoga poses like the dog should use the methods in question, advises the Mannheimer psychologist Gebauer, author of the study on yoga and overconfidence. They are only problematic if sick people omit necessary therapy or medication out of sheer enthusiasm. Meditation cannot cure everything, cautions Ulrich Ott, a psychologist at the Bender Institute of Neuroimaging and head of the Altered States of Consciousness and Meditation Research working group at Gießen's Justus Liebig University. Because of the many positive reports, more people with mental disorders now come to meditation courses than in the past. Meditation teachers tell me they feel overwhelmed by it, says the researcher. They are not trained for this. In a project funded by the German Research Foundation, he himself investigated the conditions under which people can suffer harm during meditation. People with traumatic experiences, for example, are often so distracted in everyday life that they are hardly affected by it. In meditation, however, attention is focused inward, lowering the threshold for such thoughts. For some, he says, this is so overwhelming that psychotherapeutic counseling becomes necessary. This video, unlike 99.9% of the other content on the subject, focus mostly on negative aspects. However, you should keep in mind that for most people, the advantages most likely outweigh the disadvantages. Here are a few more positive insights. Scientists are not only investigating the disadvantages of mindfulness movement, they are also discovering advantages. The neuroscientist Ott from Gießen, for example, is researching what mindfulness does on a neural level. The researcher uses neuroimaging MRI technology to examine what happens in the brain during meditation and how the organ changes in the long run. Then people practice the methods on a regular basis. Meditation trains attentiveness, Ott says. In fact, measurements on the brain provide evidence for this. Researchers led by neuropsychologist Anna Lorden of the Parvanop University in Naples have found that regular meditation can bring about lasting changes in the brain. In the hippocampus, a structure that is crucial for memory and learning processes, they found higher resting activity in people who regularly meditate than in the control group using MRI, which records activity in the brain with the help of magnetic field sensors. The researchers concluded that meditating could be one of various preventative strategies against Alzheimer's disease and dementia, for example. Hopefully, the video helped you to understand the topic of meditation and mindfulness in a more nuanced way. Have you ever meditated, and what was your experience? Let me know in the comments. Bye!